It was a typical busy morning at Trump Tower, the towering icon of luxury and power that stood proudly in the heart of Manhattan. The offices were bustling with activity and the air hummed with the sound of high heels clicking on marble floors, telephones ringing, and people frantically typing away on their computers. This was the nerve center of one of the most influential families in America, and everyone who worked there knew that their reputation demanded excellence at all times. But for one employee, this particular morning would be anything but typical. Dylan Sanders had always been a bit of an outsider at Trump Tower. He had joined the company only 6 months ago, a young, eager man fresh out of college, eager to prove his worth. The job he had landed wasn't glamorous, but it was at the prestigious Trump Organization, an opportunity that many people would kill for. Dylan had quickly learned that working at Trump Tower meant one thing above all else: being constantly on your toes. Every task was urgent, every phone call important, and the expectations were sky high. It was an environment that demanded perfection, and Dylan was trying his best to fit in. But there was one problem. Dylan was exhausted. Between long hours at the office, juggling multiple projects, and trying to impress his superiors, Dylan hadn't had a good night's sleep in weeks. He tried everything to stay awake, drinking coffee by the gallon, taking quick power naps, and even resorting to energy drinks. But no matter what he did, his body was simply not cooperating. He had come in that morning, barely able to keep his eyes open, and by mid-morning he felt his eyelids growing heavier and heavier. It started innocently enough. Dylan had been sitting at his desk, furiously typing away at a report when his head drooped for just a moment. But that moment was all it took. The exhaustion caught up with him, and before he knew it, he had nodded off. It wasn't as if he was lying down in the break room or curled up under his desk. No, Dylan was still sitting upright, his head propped up by his hand. But to anyone passing by, it was clear he was asleep. And that's when Sarah, one of the senior executives, spotted him. Sarah had worked at Trump Tower for nearly a decade. She had seen everything from high-stakes meetings to office shenanigans, but she had never witnessed anything like this. Dylan was supposed to be the new star employee, the young go-getter who was going to make a name for himself. Instead, he was now caught in a compromising position, sleeping on the job in the middle of the workday. She couldn't believe her eyes. Sarah quickly approached his desk, her heels clicking sharply on the floor, a mixture of irritation and disbelief on her face. As she got closer, she saw that Dylan was completely unaware of her presence, his breathing steady and his head now resting comfortably on his hand. For a moment, Sarah stood there, debating what to do. Should she wake him up? Should she report it to HR? After all, this was Trump Tower. Such an incident could be a career-ending mistake, especially when one was dealing with the Trump family. But as she looked at Dylan's peaceful expression, something inside her shifted. She decided to take a different approach. Instead of waking him up, Sarah moved quietly to the side and pressed the intercom button on the wall, alerting the office manager, Robert. She could already hear him on the other end of the line. "Sarah, what's going on? Everything okay?" "There's an issue you need to see," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "One of the employees is sleeping at his desk." The intercom crackled and Robert's voice came through, dripping with disbelief. "Sleeping? At Trump Tower?" "Exactly," Sarah replied. "I think we need to handle this carefully." Moments later, Robert arrived, his face a mixture of shock and confusion. Together, they stood there for a few moments, looking at Dylan's slumped form. They exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to proceed. But before they could make a decision, a voice echoed down the hallway. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The voice was unmistakable. It was Ivanka Trump, the elder daughter of the President of the United States, and the person who held the highest position in the company. Ivanka had a reputation for being sharp, no-nonsense, and someone who expected the best from everyone in the organization. The last thing anyone wanted was to disappoint her. Sarah and Robert immediately straightened up, trying to put on their most professional faces as Ivanka approached. When she reached them, Ivanka's gaze fell on Dylan, who was still fast asleep at his desk. There was a long, uncomfortable silence as Ivanka observed the scene. Sarah and Robert braced themselves for an angry outburst, but to their surprise, Ivanka remained calm, almost thoughtful. "Is he asleep?" Ivanka asked, her voice low but sharp. "Yes, he is," Sarah replied, trying to explain the situation. "We weren't sure what to do. We didn't want to make things worse." Ivanka tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she considered the situation. It wasn't exactly something you saw every day at Trump Tower. But Ivanka wasn't one to overreact, especially not in front of her staff. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "Let him sleep." The room fell silent. Everyone exchanged confused glances. Ivanka noticed their hesitation and added, if he's this tired, there's a reason for it. Maybe he's overworked, maybe he's dealing with something personal. Either way, it's not our place to punish him for being human. Sarah and Robert were stunned. This was not the response they had anticipated. Ivanka wasn't angry. She wasn't even upset. Instead, she seemed understanding. But what about his responsibilities? Sarah asked, still unsure of how to proceed. I'll handle it, Ivanka replied with a calm smile. Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. As Ivanka turned to leave, she added one final thought, this place is high pressure. If he's struggling, we need to address it as a team, not as his superiors. With that, she walked away, leaving Sarah and Robert standing there in stunned silence. The atmosphere in the office had completely shifted. What could have been a major scandal, an employee caught sleeping at his desk in one of the most prestigious buildings in America, had been defused with a simple act of empathy. But what would happen next? Would Ivanka's response truly set the tone for the rest of the office? Would Dylan be able to turn things around, or would this incident haunt him forever? One thing was for certain, the incident had shocked everyone, and it was clear that Ivanka Trump's leadership style was not what anyone had expected. The incident with Dylan had taken a strange turn. Most people in the office were expecting some form of harsh reprimand, a typical reaction when someone was caught slacking off in such a high-stakes environment. But Ivanka Trump's response had been anything but typical. As the day wore on, the story of the sleeping employee quickly spread through the office like wildfire. Whispers filled the hallways, and curious glances were exchanged behind closed doors. How could someone fall asleep at Trump Tower? Wasn't this place supposed to be the epitome of hard work and ambition? And yet, the most surprising part was that Ivanka Trump herself had taken a very different approach, one that no one could have predicted. As word got around, Sarah and Robert exchanged frequent looks, still unsure about Ivanka's decision. They had both worked under Ivanka for years, and while they admired her intelligence and composure, they had never seen her handle a situation like this before. Most bosses would have fired an employee for such a blatant display of laziness, or at the very least would have given them a stern warning. But Ivanka had handled it with grace and understanding. She hadn't even raised her voice, nor had she made any accusations. She had simply pointed out that Dylan was likely overworked and needed rest. In an environment where burnout was a common issue, her reaction felt almost revolutionary. By mid-afternoon, Sarah couldn't help but feel compelled to check in on Dylan. After all, Ivanka had left the situation in her hands. She made her way over to his desk and found him still asleep, though this time he was resting more comfortably, his head leaning against the desk. His exhaustion seemed to have taken over completely. Sarah hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should wake him up. But as she looked at Dylan, she felt a pang of empathy. It was clear that this wasn't just a simple case of slacking off. There were deeper issues at play here, and it was starting to dawn on Sarah that perhaps Dylan wasn't the only one in the office feeling overwhelmed. Instead of shaking him awake, Sarah gently placed a hand on his shoulder and softly said, Dylan, you need to wake up. We've got a lot to get done today." Dylan stirred, his eyes slowly fluttering open. He looked up at Sarah, clearly startled. His face flushed a deep shade of red as he sat up straight and immediately began to apologize. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he muttered, his voice full of embarrassment. "I don't know what happened. I've just been so exhausted lately. I couldn't keep my eyes open." Sarah smiled softly. "It's okay. Ivanka gave you some leeway, but maybe you should take a break. You've been pushing yourself too hard." Dylan's eyes widened. "Wait, Ivanka? She's okay with it?" Sarah nodded. "Yes. She's actually the one who told us not to make a big deal out of it." For a moment, Dylan just sat there, stunned. "I thought for sure I was going to be fired. I mean, who does that? Who falls asleep at work, especially here?" "Apparently, you're not the only one who's feeling the pressure," Sarah said, her tone slightly more serious. "We're all working long hours, but sometimes it's okay to step back and recharge. I think Ivanka saw that." Dylan's face relaxed, a hint of gratitude creeping into his expression. "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what I would have done without her or without you." Before Sarah could respond, a voice interrupted them. "Dylan, I need you to come to my office for a moment." It was Ivanka's assistant, Nina, standing in the doorway, her eyes fixed on Dylan. Dylan's stomach dropped. "Am I in trouble?" Nina smiled, though there was an air of formality to her expression. Not at all. Ivanka just wants to have a quick word with you. Dylan stood up quickly, feeling his nerves return. Okay, I'll be right there. As he walked past Sarah, she gave him a reassuring nod. You're fine, Dylan. Just go talk to Ivanka. She's not going to bite? Dylan made his way down the sleek hallway, his footsteps echoing in the otherwise quiet space. The towering walls of glass and marble, the polished floors, Trump Tower had an intimidating aura, one that was both awe-inspiring and, at times, overwhelming. When he reached Ivanka's office, Nina gestured for him to enter. Come in, Dylan, Ivanka's voice called from behind the desk. Dylan stepped inside, his heart pounding. Ivanka was sitting at her desk, her posture as poised and confident as ever. But today there was a softness in her demeanor that made her seem more approachable. Please, take a seat, Ivanka said, gesturing to the chair in front of her desk. Dylan hesitated before sitting down, his palms slightly sweaty as he tried to compose himself. Ivanka studied him for a moment before speaking. I'm sure you're wondering why I called you here, she began, her voice calm and steady. I thought I might be in trouble, Dylan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Ivanka smiled slightly. You were caught sleeping at your desk, Dylan. That's not exactly ideal behavior. But I'm not here to scold you. I'm here to talk. Dylan blinked, confused. Talk? Yes, Ivanka said, leaning forward a little. I want to understand what's going on. I've noticed you've been working long hours lately. Are you overwhelmed? Dylan didn't know how to respond. He hadn't expected Ivanka to approach the situation with such concern. I guess I've been trying to prove myself, he said slowly. I want to do a good job, but it's a lot. I haven't had much sleep and I'm constantly on the go. Ivanka nodded thoughtfully. I understand. The pace here can be brutal. But I want you to know that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to take a step back when you need it. Dylan felt his anxiety ease a little, the weight on his shoulders lifting just slightly. Ivanka's words were a balm to his stressed mind. You're a valuable part of this team, Dylan, Ivanka continued, but your well-being comes first. We can't expect great work if we're running on empty. So here's what I'm going to do. Dylan leaned forward, intrigued. I'm going to give you a few days to rest. I want you to recharge and come back ready to contribute at your best. But don't think of this as a punishment, Ivanka added with a smile. Think of it as an opportunity to reset. Dylan stared at Ivanka, astonished. This was the last thing he had expected. In fact, it was the exact opposite of what he had feared. The relief that washed over him was almost overwhelming. I don't know what to say, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Ivanka smiled warmly. You're welcome. Just remember, we're all human. And sometimes we need a little break to be at our best. Dylan left Ivanka's office with a feeling of surreal relief. It was a rare thing in the corporate world to be shown such understanding, and even rarer to be given a second chance when you least expected it. The weight of his exhaustion seemed to lift as he walked back to his desk, though a part of him still couldn't believe the conversation had gone so differently from what he had imagined. When he returned to his cubicle, Sarah was already there, looking up from her computer screen. She had been waiting for some sort of update, but as she saw the expression on Dylan's face, she knew the outcome had been more positive than he had anticipated. Well? Sarah asked with a raised eyebrow. Dylan couldn't help but grin. I'm not fired. Sarah laughed softly. I told you. Ivanka doesn't play by the usual rules. No kidding, Dylan replied, still processing the conversation. She was so understanding. I mean, I thought for sure she'd reprimand me or at least give me a warning. But no. She actually told me to take a few days off to rest. Sarah blinked in surprise. She what? She told you to take time off. Yeah, Dylan said, his voice almost disbelieving. She said I need to recharge. She said the company needs me at my best and running on empty isn't going to cut it. That's incredible, Sarah remarked. You don't hear that kind of leadership every day. Ivanka really gets it. She understands what it means to push yourself too hard, and she knows when to step in and say enough is enough. Dylan nodded slowly. I'm honestly shocked. I expected to get a lecture, maybe even be fired, but instead, I feel like she's invested in my well-being. That's the thing about Ivanka, Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. She's not just about work. She understands the people who work for her. And she knows how to handle things with grace, which is rare in this place. Dylan was still trying to absorb everything. Ivanka had treated him not like an employee who had made a mistake, but as a human being who had simply reached his breaking point. It was a humbling experience, one that made him reflect on his approach to work. As the afternoon passed, the office's usual frenetic energy seemed to soften. The employees who had witnessed Ivanka's handling of the situation began to talk among themselves, discussing her unexpected empathy and the calm with which she dealt with a potentially volatile situation. In the break room, a group of staff members gathered around, chatting about the events of the day. "I don't know about you guys, but I'm impressed," one of the junior executives, Claire, remarked as she stirred her coffee. "Most bosses would have fired someone on the spot for falling asleep at work. But Ivanka? She actually gave him time to rest. That's kind of incredible." "I agree," another colleague, Mark, said, nodding. "It's like she understands that people need a break, especially with the pressure we're under here. It's hard to keep up the pace day in and day out." "Ivanka's always been like that though," Claire continued. "She's tough when she needs to be, but she's also compassionate. It's why people respect her so much around here." Back at his desk, Dylan found himself feeling a newfound sense of gratitude for Ivanka's leadership. The decision to give him time off wasn't just about offering a break, it was a message that spoke to the heart of the corporate culture she was building in Trump Tower. It was a message that said, "We value you as a person, not just an employee." As the days passed, Dylan took Ivanka's advice and used the time to recharge. He spent some time reflecting on his work habits and realized how much he had been pushing himself without realizing the toll it was taking on his mental and physical health. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of clarity and relief. When he returned to work a few days later, he found the atmosphere in the office had changed as well. People seemed to be more at ease, and there was a noticeable shift in the way they interacted with one another. There was a newfound sense of respect for the idea that everyone, even the hardest workers, needed time to rest. The first morning back, Dylan made his way to the coffee machine where he ran into Sarah again. "Feeling rested?" she asked with a smile. "I am," Dylan replied, looking around at the office. "Honestly, I've never been this grateful to be back at work. It's not just about the break, it's the fact that Ivanka's leadership made me realize that I'm not just another cog in the machine." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly. Ivanka's approach makes this place different. She doesn't just want results, she wants to see us succeed as whole people. And that's something not all companies understand." Over the next few weeks, Ivanka's leadership continued to shape the way the office operated. Dylan noticed that others began to open up more about their own struggles with burnout, and it wasn't long before Ivanka initiated a series of conversations with her team about managing work-life balance. The conversations were frank and candid, and for once, the focus wasn't on delivering numbers or hitting targets, it was about preserving the well-being of everyone in the office. As the days turned into weeks, Dylan felt his energy and focus return. He became more productive, more creative, and more engaged in his work. The time off had allowed him to reconnect with his passion for the job, and the understanding and support from Ivanka had made all the difference. But what really stuck with him was the realization that Ivanka had created an environment where empathy and hard work could coexist. It was a rare thing in the corporate world, and it was something that had changed Dylan's perspective on leadership forever. The days following Ivanka's intervention were a turning point, not only for Dylan but for the entire office. The shift in atmosphere was palpable, and it wasn't long before others began to feel the effects of Ivanka's empathetic approach to leadership. There was a sense of openness that hadn't existed before, and for the first time in months, employees began to feel like they could talk about the pressures of their work without fear of judgment or reprimand. In the following weeks, Ivanka's office became a space for more than just business discussions. Staff members who were struggling with burnout or juggling personal challenges started reaching out to Ivanka for guidance. And each time, Ivanka's response was measured, thoughtful, and, above all, human. One afternoon, as Sarah was walking through the office, she noticed a small group gathered near Ivanka's office. It wasn't unusual to see Ivanka meeting with her team, but this time, the energy was different. It felt more like a community meeting, where the focus wasn't just about numbers or projects. It was about ensuring everyone had the support they needed to thrive. "Come in, Sarah." Ivanka's voice called from inside the office as Sarah passed by. She hesitated for a moment but then stepped inside. The office was buzzing with a quiet energy that made Sarah feel like she was stepping into something important. Ivanka was sitting at her desk, while 3 other employees, each from different departments, stood around, listening intently as she spoke. "I wanted to bring you all in today because I know we've been pushing hard lately," Ivanka was saying. "And I've been hearing a lot of feedback from everyone about the need to balance work with rest. I want to make sure that we're creating a culture where you can come to me with your struggles, whether they're personal or professional." One of the employees, a young woman from the marketing department named Emily, spoke up. I think it's great that you're having this conversation. I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately. It's like there's never a break. And sometimes I don't even know how to ask for help. Ivanka nodded, her expression compassionate. I understand, Emily. We're in a fast-paced environment, and it's easy to get lost in the hustle. But remember, it's okay to take a step back and reassess. Your well-being is just as important as the work you do here. We need you at your best, and sometimes that means giving yourself permission to rest. Sarah stood there, silently observing the conversation. She couldn't help but be impressed by Ivanka's ability to address the issue with such care. It was clear that Ivanka wasn't just trying to make her employees feel comfortable. She was actively working to build an environment where they could thrive without sacrificing their personal health. After a moment of silence, another employee, Robert, spoke up. I've been struggling with this too. We're all under pressure to keep up with deadlines and results, but I think it's time to have a real conversation about setting boundaries. Ivanka's eyes brightened as she responded. Exactly. We need to start setting boundaries not just for our work, but for our lives as well. This is something we'll be focusing on in the coming weeks, creating systems that allow us to balance our responsibilities with our need for rest. As the discussion continued, it became clear that Ivanka wasn't just making promises, she was actively creating a framework for sustainable success. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude. She had always admired Ivanka's intelligence and work ethic, but it was moments like these that made her truly appreciate the kind of leader she was. Later that day, as Sarah made her way to the elevator, she ran into Dylan. His face was beaming with a renewed energy that hadn't been there before. He was more upbeat than she had seen him in weeks. How's it going? Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. I feel like a new person, Dylan said, practically glowing. I've been taking it easy, and honestly, I've been able to recharge in a way I didn't think was possible. Ivanka really came through for me. I told you she would, Sarah said with a smile. She's not your average boss. She actually cares about us as people. I've never felt more supported, Dylan admitted, looking down at his shoes before meeting Sarah's eyes again. I think a lot of people here didn't even realize how much pressure they were under until Ivanka started this conversation. It's like the entire tone of the office shifted. People are more open now. It's like we're all in this together. It's true, Sarah agreed. I've noticed that too. There's this new sense of camaraderie, and it's not just about the work. It's about the people we're working with. As the days went on, the ripple effect of Ivanka's leadership became more and more evident. Employees from all levels began discussing the importance of mental health and self-care in ways they hadn't before. Conversations that once focused solely on deadlines and targets now included personal well-being, rest, and finding a balance between work and life. Even the most senior executives, who had long been known for their relentless drive, began to take Ivanka's approach to heart. There were meetings dedicated to work-life balance, and suddenly the concept of taking mental health days wasn't met with skepticism, it was encouraged. Ivanka had set a new tone, one that emphasized people over profits, well-being over hustle. As Sarah sat in one of these meetings, she felt a sense of pride. She had seen the toxic side of corporate culture, where burnout was rewarded with accolades and employees were expected to push through their exhaustion without hesitation. But now, she was witnessing a company-wide transformation, one that prioritized the long-term health of its employees. As the weeks progressed, the office environment continued to evolve in ways that had once seemed unimaginable. The pressure that had once defined the high-stakes atmosphere of Trump Tower now felt more manageable. Employees were not just getting their work done, they were doing so with a renewed sense of purpose, energy, and most importantly, support for one another. Dylan, now back to his full productivity, couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that fateful day when he was caught sleeping at work. He had been on the brink of burnout, just one more project away from collapsing under the pressure. But Ivanka's decision to treat him with empathy had been a turning point not just for him but for the whole office. One morning, as he made his way to the break room, he overheard a conversation between Claire and Mark. They were discussing an email that had gone out company-wide, announcing a new initiative. Ivanka had rolled out the rest and recharge policy. Did you read the email? Claire asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Ivanka's implementing official rest days. No work allowed on those days. It's company-wide. Mark shook his head, still processing the concept. I mean, I've never heard of a company doing that. But after everything that's happened, it makes sense. We've all been pushing ourselves so hard. I think it's brilliant, Claire replied. It shows that she's really listening to what people need. And it's about time someone in leadership recognized that we can't just keep working nonstop and expect to be at our best. Dylan smiled as he overheard the conversation. The idea that Ivanka was now institutionalizing rest and mental health days was a testament to how much her leadership had evolved in such a short period. It wasn't just about maintaining high performance anymore, it was about sustaining it over the long term. And that, Dylan realized, was the true mark of a great leader. As the weeks went on, Ivanka's efforts to create a balanced, empathetic culture took root. She introduced regular wellness check-ins where employees could discuss their mental health and work-life balance in a safe space. She also expanded the company's resources for therapy and counseling, ensuring that employees had access to professional support when needed. These initiatives quickly gained traction and the overall mood of the office shifted. Employees felt more valued, more heard, and, most importantly, more human. By the time the holiday season arrived, the atmosphere in the office was radically different. The usual frantic rush to meet end-of-year targets had given way to a sense of camaraderie and calm. For the first time in years, the office was not drowning in stress. Instead, employees worked together to finish their projects, but with a newfound respect for one another's boundaries and well-being. Ivanka herself seemed to be in a particularly good mood that season. She had spent the past few months actively shaping the office environment into one that prioritized people as much as profits. She knew that true success came not from pushing employees to their breaking points, but from fostering a culture of respect, trust, and balance. At the company's annual holiday party, Dylan found himself standing beside Sarah, chatting about the changes in the office. He was no longer the same person who had walked into Ivanka's office months ago, feeling lost and exhausted. The transformation had been subtle but powerful. It wasn't just the policies, it was the way Ivanka led by example. She had shown the team that leadership wasn't about demanding more, it was about understanding what each individual needed to succeed. Can you believe how much has changed? Dylan asked Sarah, raising his glass in a small toast. I know, she said, smiling. It's amazing. And I think we're all better for it. Ivanka's leadership has really made a difference. She set the tone for the whole office, and it's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter and taking care of ourselves. Dylan nodded. And that's why I'm sticking around. I've never felt this supported before. As the night went on, Ivanka stepped up to the microphone to give her usual speech. But this year, there was something different about it. She wasn't just thanking everyone for their hard work. This time, she was thanking them for their dedication to making the company a better place, a more compassionate and understanding place. I'm proud of all of you, Ivanka said, her voice clear and strong. This year, we've proven that success doesn't have to come at the expense of your well-being. We've learned that balance, respect, and empathy are just as important as results. And that's what I want for all of us, success, yes, but success that we can sustain. There was a ripple of applause from the crowd, and Dylan couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Ivanka wasn't just talking about the company's success, she was talking about the success of her employees as people. As the party continued, the conversations around the room echoed Ivanka's words. People were genuinely happy, not because they had hit some arbitrary target, but because they knew they had an employer who truly cared about their well-being. And that was something they could all get behind. As the year drew to a close, Dylan found himself reflecting on the journey. The person he had been tired, burned out, and close to quitting felt like a distant memory. The Ivanka Trump he had once seen as a distant executive was now someone he respected deeply. Her leadership had transformed not only the office but the lives of the people who worked there. And for Dylan, that made all the difference. The story of the employee who had been caught sleeping at work had become a symbol of change. Ivanka's response to Dylan's mistake had set the tone for a new chapter at Trump Tower, one where empathy, understanding, and compassion were the cornerstones of success. As the new year began, the lessons learned from that fateful day echoed in every corner of the office. And for Dylan, it was clear that the real success wasn't just about the work they did, it was about the people they had become along the way.